man, how surprised are you that the guy who won the regular season championship and cup is on the brink of elimination?
Just let me tell you how surprised I am. Ask me when I filled out my bracket, Adam, who was your champion? Martin Truex Jr. So to say I'm surprised that he could be eliminated on Saturday night at Bristol would be an understatement. Just unheard of, really. If you go back prior to Daytona, he was on a run. I think it's 7 consecutive top 7, top 8 finishes with a couple of wins mixed in. All of the points he was gathering up by winning stages and finishing up there in the top 10 in all those stages, and just the model of consistency. And to see what happened at Daytona, which is not as big a deal, but at tracks like Darlington and Kansas where you just expect he's going to be good, and to see that advantage erode is amazing. I hope he does advance, just because I feel like someone who's that good and that fast and that capable deserves to move throughout the playoffs, and we'll see what happens Saturday night.
How surprised are you, Davey?
Well, considering I also have Martin Truex Jr. as my champ, like Double A, I'm pretty surprised too. It's nuts to think that we could be in a legitimate position, where the regular season champ, for the first time ever in the history of this format, could be eliminated in the first round. And even, guys, we heard Martin Truex Jr. talk at media day and leading up to the playoffs that he had very similar vibes to his other championship 4 seasons, his past championship season. And it's crazy, the dichotomy of last year missing the postseason to this year winning the regular season championship. And now, just because of 2 bad timed weeks in a row, we could be looking at a legitimate scenario for the 19 cars no longer a factor in the postseason come Bristol, which, by the way, is one of his statistically worst racetracks. So things have gone south in a hurry for MTJ, for sure. I'm shocked.
So as you look at, and think about what his situation is, because he's 7 points below the cut line, and that means he doesn't have to climb over. He just has to move above the cut line. So he has to pass somebody somewhere along the line. So if you're in their shoes, James Small's shoes and Martin's shoes, Adam, how do you play it Saturday night? Do you play it, let's get out, let's qualify as good as we can and try to pick up as many stage points as possible? Or do you play, let's go for let's do everything we can to get that win?
You can have a mindset going there on what you need to do, but I think realistically, you wait and see what happens Friday in qualifying. Where did we qualify? Based on practice, you'll know how good or bad you think your race car is and what you're capable of. If you have a great race car, just go out and win the race and forget about it. If you don't think maybe we've got that car that's hit the sweet spot that can go win the race, depending on where you qualified, might help how you manage that opening stage. Realistically, and we know there could be some cautions where strategy becomes a factor, and maybe you stay out to get some stage points, or you flip the stage because you're not going to get stage points to establish some track position for later in the race. Ultimately, though, you really don't know how to play the game, depending on the cautions, until you get through that second stage. All those stage points have been awarded. Everybody's on a level playing field to know exactly what they need to do to advance. And then at that point, you start attacking. But I feel like there are a few different points where you evaluate your weekend into practice and qualifying, and then ultimately the end of stage 2 to know exactly what you have to accomplish if you're going to move on.
I think back to last year, Davey, how weird Bristol was last year. Remember Kyle Busch had problems early in the race, went out of the race, and it was like, oh, well, he's toast. But then weird things started happening to other people, and then it's like, even while Kyle was out of the race, he got back into the playoffs, and then he was out, and then he was in, and at the end of the day, he ended up getting eliminated. But it was one of these weird nights where even though he was out of the race, he kept getting back in.
That's just kind of seemingly what happens in these playoffs, and specifically in the first round too. And I get that it kind of dwindles as you go on because you get rid of playoff contenders. But if I'm Martin Truex Jr. and James Small, I don't think that I can just purely rely on other drivers and teams taking themselves out, because yes, 7 points is not a lot, but on the flip side, 7 points could be the difference, right? Whether it's going for stage points in the first frame versus not, whether it's seeing what people do in the first 2 stages versus running your own race. There are a plethora of ways that the team and the driver can attack Bristol, but there's a lot of ways that Bristol and the 15 other guys that are in the playoffs can then attack the 19 team and attack Martin Truex Jr. You don't think that Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick have anything to race for? Even though they're locked in, I guarantee you they don't want Martin Truex Jr. to point his way in. Maybe Reddick because he's a Toyota teammate, but you see my argument, right? If they're able to keep a driver and a team of that caliber out of the postseason and have that upset of him not make it past the first round, that leads the path to them to get to the championship for a bit easier, to not have to overcome somebody with the rash of playoff points like the 19 and Martin Truex Jr. has. So there's a bunch of different strategies that the 19 team can play, but I think in turn, there's a lot more that the 15 other guys can play to try to thwart that as well.
Well, you look at the other guys that are on the negative side of the bubble. Bubba Wallace is 12 back. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is 15 back. Michael McDowell is pretty much in a win or else situation as he's 40 back. But the thing is, with Stenhouse, for instance, he's really pretty good at Bristol when you get down to it. As you look at him being, and I misstated, he's 22 back. He's really pretty good at Bristol. I mean, he's the kind of guy that could get up there. He may have to win, but he's got a shot. And Bubba has been really fast. He just had bad luck.
Well, and you hate it for Bubba Wallace because we had so many people far smarter than me, our analysts, that just felt like they put so much into the stretch run of the regular season to make it into the playoffs that once we got in to the playoffs, Darlington and beyond, the 23 team would be out of gas. And they had the early hiccup at Darlington. They come back and finish 7th. He gets to only 1 point below the cut line, and he's very much in a position to move on. They get those stage points, very fast race car, early first stage on Sunday at Kansas, and they're running great. He's second, and all signs point toward he might win the race, but he's definitely going to put himself above the cut line going to Bristol, and then the tire unravels. And now I wouldn't say Bubba's, you were talking about who's in a must-win. I don't think they're in a must-win at 19 below, but it's going to be really hard if someone doesn't have a problem for them just to go out and race their way in. But that's an unfortunate one because here's someone that you didn't know what they were capable of, first appearance in the playoffs, and they had done everything right. You have the tire issue, and now they find themselves with a very vertical mountain to climb if they are going to get to the round of 12.
Davey, how do you view those guys? And to me, one of the brilliant moves at Kansas was what Joey Logano, those guys, and Paul Wolfe did. They stayed out on that last caution, knew they were going to lose some spots, but they made up enough spots that he went from on the bubble, I mean, literally on the bubble and maybe on the negative side of the bubble, to having a plus 12 right now going to the last race. And that could have been a huge move for those guys.
That's a Paul Wolfe special right there, making chicken salad out of you-know-what. That was an incredible turn of events for the 22 team. I think that they're in a good spot right now, obviously plus 12 to the cut. So if they're able to just stay clean and green, not really shoot themselves in the foot, they should be in a solid position to advance. But to your point, I mean, I think McDowell 40 back, he's pretty much in a must-win scenario. Got to throw a Hail Mary and hope other people in front of you have trouble if you can't win the race. Stenhouse 22 back, he's in a very similar position. And even though we think of him having solid runs at Bristol, his last 3 finishes there have not really been that good. 33rd, 20th, and dead last, 40th after an accident early a few years ago. So if you're those guys below the bubble, including Bubba Wallace, 19 points, that's not an insurmountable amount to try to point your way in. But again, you're going to have to rely on some people ahead of you having trouble, which, let's be honest, is probably going to happen. But you also need to be clean and not get yourself in trouble either, which is much easier said than done, especially at a track like Bristol that, as we know, is self-cleaning. And all it takes is one ill-timed caution that you have no control over to get your day in a tizzy. If you're on pit road or off pit road at the incorrect time, your day could be turned upside down real quick.